People thought it was a sunrise, some rare cosmic event, until the news feeds filled with images of the ships. They were long and silver, slicing through the clouds like knives, each one the size of a mountain. They didn't come with thunder or fire. They came with silence. The world held its breath. For 3 days the ships hung over the major cities, New York, Beijing, Lagos, London, and more. Governments sent messages. Scientists sent signals. Priests prayed. Children pointed. The whole planet waited for a voice from the sky. And then it came. We come in peace. We come to guide. We come to bring balance. The voice was smooth, calm, almost human. The aliens called themselves the Xyrics, caretakers of order in the void. They said they had watched humanity for centuries. They spoke of ending war, ending hunger, ending chaos. They promised peace. People cried in the streets. Soldiers lowered their guns. The world, tired of fighting itself, believed. The United Nations surrendered within a week, not from fear, but from hope. The Xyrics offered technology, medicine, knowledge beyond human dreams. They asked only for trust, and trust was given freely because humanity wanted to believe it had finally found someone better than itself. But peace didn't come. Not really. It started small. One city at a time, relocations began, partnership programs, resource exchanges. People volunteered, believing they were helping build a new future. None of them came back. When the questions started, the Xyrics shut down communications. Governments that resisted vanished overnight. Whole countries went dark. Satellites stopped working. The skies turned from blue to gray. And then the harvest began. It wasn't war, it was cleansing. Silent, efficient, absolute. Their drones swept across the land, burning everything that didn't obey. Oceans boiled under their reactors. Skies cracked with their thunder. In the cities, people screamed, but the Xyrics never raised their voices. They didn't gloat. They didn't rage. They just did, with cold, perfect precision. Balance must be restored, they said. Humanity tried to fight back, but their weapons were useless. Missiles burned out before they reached the ships. Nukes detonated harmlessly in the upper atmosphere. Even the bravest soldiers died without seeing their enemy's face. In a single week, half of Earth was ash. By the second, the rest followed. And when it was over, when the fires died and the screams faded, the Xyrics left. No explanation, no warning, just silence. They took what they wanted, metals, water, genetic samples, and vanished into the void. To them, it was just another operation, another correction to maintain universal balance. They thought humanity would die quietly. They thought the survivors would pray for mercy, or curse their gods, or simply fade into dust like all the others before them. But humans are strange creatures. We don't die cleanly. We rot, we break, we burn, and still somehow we get up. In the ruins, a boy found a rusted rifle buried under the rubble. In a bunker, an old scientist reactivated a dead satellite. In the wasteland, a soldier swore an oath with blood on her hands. There were few, starving, scattered. But they remembered. They whispered stories of the old world, of songs, of laughter, of cities that once glowed like stars. They taught their children to read from burned books and carved lessons into stone walls. They learned how to hide from Xyric scanners. They learned how to kill their drones. They learned how to wait. And most of all, they learned never to forgive. The Xyrics called it peace. Humans called it slaughter. But history would remember it by another name, the Day of the Ashes. Years later, travelers across the stars would find what was left of Earth and wonder how anyone had survived. They would see cities buried in glass, oceans that steamed with radiation, forests of twisted metal. But beneath all that, in the dark veins of the world, humanity still breathed. Waiting, watching, remembering. And when the first spark of fire flickered again under the dead sky, It wasn't a prayer. It was a promise. You wanted balance, the survivors whispered. We'll show you balance. The universe had forgotten Earth. But Earth had not forgotten the universe. And somewhere far beyond the stars, the Zyrex slept easy, unaware that the species they had erased was learning how to right its revenge. In fire, the world didn't end with the fire. It ended in silence. No governments, no cities, no sky traffic or glowing screens, just wind moving through empty towers and dust falling over bones. For years, the Earth was quiet, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. But humanity didn't die. Not all of it. Deep underground, in forgotten bunkers and frozen shelters, the survivors lived. They were the leftovers of every kind, soldiers who refused to surrender, farmers who dug their homes into mountains, children born in the dark who had never seen the sun. They called themselves the Left Behind. For a long time they did not fight, they just survived. They hunted rats in the ruins, melted rain for water, shared scraps of food and stories of the time before the ships. The old ones spoke of blue skies and laughter. The young listened and imagined. And in that imagining, a spark began to grow. The last teacher. In a bunker beneath what had once been Colorado, an old woman named Mara kept a small school. It wasn't much, just a cracked screen, a hand-drawn map, and a voice that refused to fade. Every morning, she would gather the children and teach them words the Zyrex had tried to erase. Freedom, she would say. Justice. Human. Words that tasted like fire. One day a boy asked her, "Why do we learn this if the sky is dead?" Mara smiled, thin and tired. "Because one day, child, it won't be." She didn't live to see that day, but her words did. The warlord and the mechanic. Far in the north, a man named Harlan found an old military vault buried under ice. Inside, he found relics, rusted rifles, dead drones, and one working war suit. It was ancient, barely holding together, but to him it was a gift from ghosts. He fixed it piece by piece, using scavenged parts and broken circuits. He learned how to power it using a small reactor from an abandoned ship. People came to him bringing weapons, machines, old tech. He fixed everything, traded for food and loyalty. By the time the third winter ended, Harlan's bunker had become a fortress. By the fifth, it was a city. He called it New Bastion. And when travelers came with stories of other survivors across the seas, Harlan didn't just listen, he sent scouts. The spark was spreading. The signal. In the year 31 after the ashes, a scientist named Jun Wei found an old satellite buried beneath the Mojave. It was broken, fried, and forgotten, but Jun was stubborn. He spent 5 years fixing it, soldering wires by candlelight, feeding power from scavenged batteries. When he finally turned it on, the screen glowed with static, and then faintly a signal. It wasn't alien. It was human. A voice, weak, distorted, but real. Colony ship Helios, orbiting Titan, survivors repeat survivors. Jun fell to his knees and wept. The universe hadn't forgotten humanity after all. The oath. Word spread like wildfire. Across the ruins, people whispered it in the dark. We are not alone. The phrase became a prayer and then a promise. Villages joined together, roads reopened, old tech was revived. They built new weapons from scrap and old knowledge. They called themselves the Cinders, for they were the fire that refused to die. Every child learned the story of the harvest. Every adult swore the same oath. We remember, we rebuild, we will return. And though the sky was still empty, they began to prepare for the day it would not be. The ghosts of fire. Sometimes, at night, survivors would see streaks of light in the upper atmosphere. Old satellites falling, or maybe the wreckage of alien drones still drifting above. Children would point and ask, "Are they coming back?" And the elders would answer, "Yes, but this time so are we." The quiet years were not peaceful. They were full of hunger, fear, and death. But in those years, humanity changed. The softness that once made them easy to betray turned into steel. Their kindness did not die, it hardened into justice. They no longer prayed for rescue. They planned for revenge. The promise beneath the ashes. By the 50th year after the ashes, Earth was still scarred and broken, but alive. Crops grew again in the cracks. Rivers ran red with dust but carried water. Machines hummed beneath the ruins. And in secret, under the shattered sky, the cinders built something new, something vast and angry. Engines the size of cities, weapons that could reach the stars, a fleet born from grief and fury. They didn't know when the Zyrex would return. But when they did, humanity would be waiting, not as prey, not as victims, but as hunters. Because mercy had died with the old world. And what replaced it was sharper, colder, unstoppable. The quiet years were over. The next time the stars burned over Earth, it would not be in silence. It would be war. For 50 long years, Earth slept beneath its scars. Wind carved through the ruins of cities. Grass grew through broken streets. From orbit it looked quiet, dead even, the perfect ghost world. And that's exactly what the Zyrex believed. When their silver ships appeared again in the sky, no one on board expected resistance. The fleet was small, 3 harvesters stripped of weapons and crewed by a handful of overseers. Their mission was simple: reclaim what metals remained, gather data, then leave. It was routine. Another dead world. Another job. Until the scanners began to fail. The arrival. The lead ship, Voron's Promise, descended over the ruins of New York. Its captain, a tall, thin being named Elrek, studied the surface through the viewport. His skin shimmered like glass, his eyes cold and sharp. Radiation levels low, no signs of life, his aide reported. Just debris. Elrek nodded. Begin extraction. The species is long gone. The drones launched, black, sleek, and mindless. They swept through the ruins, slicing metal, mapping terrain, feeding energy into the ship's collectors. And deep below, in the tunnels where humanity had waited, alarms began to blink. The awakening. Commander Harlan stood before a cracked screen, watching the alien readings crawl across it. He was older now, gray-bearded, one arm mechanical, the other clutching a worn rifle. Around him, the bunker hummed with energy, reactors roaring to life after decades of silence. "They're back," said Junwei, his voice trembling with both fear and excitement. Harlan smiled, the kind of smile that had nothing to do with joy. "Then it's time." He turned to the crowd of fighters, men and women in patched armor, eyes burning bright under the glow of emergency lights. "For 50 years we waited," he said. "For 50 years they thought we were broken. Today we show them what they made." No one cheered. They didn't need to. The silence itself was an oath. The trap. As the drones moved deeper into the ruins, they passed over old roads and half-buried structures. Beneath one cracked skyscraper lay a shape, round, metallic, humming faintly. A reactor. Human-built. Sleeping for decades. When the drone passed over it, the device woke. And in that instant, the city came alive. Missiles burst from hidden silos, trailing fire. Railguns hidden in collapsed buildings roared, slamming steel into the sky. The first Zyrex drone exploded in a blinding flash, then another, then 100 more. Elrek's ship shuddered as alarms screamed. "What is this?" his aide cried. Elrek froze, a trap. On the ground, Harlan's voice echoed through the comms. "Welcome back to Earth." The fire. The second ship tried to rise, but something locked onto it. An old satellite, reprogrammed by Junwei decades ago. It fell from orbit like a meteor, smashing into the ship's hull with a force that cracked the sky open. Fire rained down across the eastern seaboard. From the bunkers, the survivors watched with wide eyes. For the first time in generations, they saw the enemy burn. The third ship turned to flee. Its engines flared as it climbed through the clouds, but its transmission cut through the chaos. Humans cease, we bring peace, we. Static. Then silence. The Voron's promise was gone, swallowed by a blinding burst of plasma from the surface. When the smoke cleared, only fragments drifted in orbit. The message. Harlan stood in the ruins of New York watching the sky burn. His armor was scorched, his arm dripping oil and blood. Around him, soldiers cheered, laughed, cried. He tapped his radio. Jun, send it. Junwei, sitting by the humming console miles away, nodded. His fingers flew across the keys. The signal spread outward across the stars, carried by the same frequencies the Zyrex once used to control them. A single message, no encryption, no code. Earth stands, we remember. The flame rekindled. The survivors buried their dead, salvaged what they could, and rebuilt the weapons that still worked. For the first time in 50 years, they looked to the sky not with fear but hunger. Junwei watched the horizon and whispered, "Do you think they'll come back?" Harlan smiled. "They have to, they're too proud not to." "And when they do?" Jun asked. Harlan looked up at the burning wrecks in the sky, their flames reflected in his metal eye. "When they do," he said softly, "we'll send them a message they'll never forget." Above them, the wreckage of the alien ships circled Earth like dying stars. The night sky glowed red. Children pointed and asked what the lights were. And the elders said, "Those are our ghosts, and that is our warning." The Zyrex thought humanity was gone. But all they had done was teach humans how to survive, how to adapt, and how to hate with purpose. They came to collect a dead world. Instead, they woke something far worse. A world that remembered. And this time, it would not forgive. The sky still burned 3 days after the battle. Fragments of alien metal drifted like dying stars above the Earth, glowing red against the black. To the survivors, it wasn't destruction. It was proof. They had done it. The invincible Zyrex had fallen, and humanity still stood. Commander Harlan watched from the roof of an old skyscraper, wind howling around the steel skeleton. His armor was cracked, his mechanical arm sparking. He didn't feel the pain. He only felt the weight of what had just happened. "We did it," said Junwei softly, standing beside him. "After 50 years. Harlan's eyes stayed on the horizon. "No," he said, "we just started." The transmission. Beneath their feet, deep underground, the old communication arrays roared back to life. Cables hissed, screens flickered, and satellites that had been silent for half a century blinked awake. Jun sat at the console, fingers flying over the keyboard. He had spent most of his life preparing for this moment, learning how to speak across the stars, how to make their signal travel where human ships could not. When the system asked for the message, he hesitated only a second. Then he typed, "Earth stands, we remember." And then he sent it, straight into the void. The signal burst from the antennas, passing through the wreckage, climbing into space like a scream wrapped in light. It traveled through the black for days, then weeks. It reached Mars first. The echoes. On the red planet, beneath the dust and frozen storms, a human mining colony still survived. The people there had been descendants of those who fled during the harvest. They had never known Earth as a home, only as a story whispered around dim campfires. When the signal arrived, every transmitter lit up. Every voice went silent. And when the message played, the miners dropped their tools. "Earth stands, we remember." Old Captain Amina laughed until she cried. "They did it," she whispered. "By the stars, they actually did it." Within hours, Mars sent its reply. "Mars hears you, coming home." From there, the signal spread, jumping between human outposts, old relay stations, half-dead satellites, even scavenger ships drifting in the dark. Each one carried the message further, louder, brighter. Soon the words weren't just a message. They were a rallying cry. The rebirth. On Titan, a human colony that had lived in silence for generations gathered in its central dome. Children who had never seen a blue sky watched as the signal played across every screen. "Is it real?" one asked. Their leader, a gray-haired woman named Alara, nodded. "It's real, Earth lives." Then she stood, her eyes shining with something none of them had seen before: hope. "Prepare the ships," she said. "It's time to go home." Across the solar system, the same thing happened. Engines that hadn't burned in decades roared awake. Old ships were pulled from frozen hangars. Weapons were reforged, armor plates welded. Humanity was no longer scattered embers. It was a storm. The fear beyond the stars. When the signal reached the edge of Zyrex space, it didn't go unnoticed. The alien relays caught it, decoded it, and froze. Humans were supposed to be extinct. The Earth was supposed to be dead. And yet there it was, a message simple and direct. Defiant. The Zyrex Council gathered in panic. Some called it impossible. Others called it blasphemy. But one of their elders, a being older than their empire itself, spoke softly. "I told you," it said. "They are not like the others, they do not forget." The spark of unity. Back on Earth, Harlan received the first reply. The old radio tower crackled to life, and a voice came through, filled with static but unmistakably human. "This is the Helios colony. We received your message. We are armed. We are ready." Harlan grinned. "Then let's make it official." He turned to Jun. "Send them the coordinates. Tell every human who can hear us, we're building something new." "What do we call it?" Jun asked. Harlan looked up at the burning sky, the debris glowing like constellations. "The Cinder Fleet," he said, "born from ashes made of fire." Jun smiled faintly. "You think they'll come for us again?" "Oh, they'll come," Harlan said. "But this time they won't find a grave, they'll find an army." The fire spreads. The message didn't just reach humans. Other species, small, frightened, conquered races once broken by the Zyrex, heard it too. They listened to the human words, replayed them, studied the signal. "Earth stands, we remember." And for the first time in centuries, something stirred in their hearts. If the humans could rise from extinction, then maybe they could too. Across the galaxy, the fire spread. Whispers became voices. Voices became screams. And in the center of it all, humanity stood once more, battered but unbroken, surrounded by a sky they had set on fire. The Zyrex had wanted obedience. They had wanted silence. Instead, they had created the loudest sound the universe had ever heard. The sound of a species coming back to life. The message had done what no weapon ever could. It awoke the human race. From Mars to Titan, from old colony ships drifting in forgotten orbits to frozen bases buried under alien sands, humanity answered. And for the first time in centuries, the stars echoed with a sound they had not heard in 50 years. Human engines. The gathering. Commander Harlan stood in the command bay of the rebuilt orbital station Genesis, staring through the glass at Earth below. It was scarred and gray, but alive. Patches of green glowed where forests had begun to return. In orbit, ship after ship assembled, their hulls patched together from scrap and scavenged alien metal. Beside him, Junwei looked over the data. His face was thinner now, older, his hands trembling from exhaustion. "We've got 200 ships confirmed," he said. Another 50 on the way from Mars. Not bad for a dead species, Harlan muttered, a tired smile touching his lips. He turned to face the officers behind him, pilots, engineers, soldiers, scientists. Men and women who had lived through fire and silence. Every one of them carried a story carved in scars. This fleet, Harlan said, his voice steady but fierce, was built from the bones of our world. Every bolt, every engine, every weapon came from what they left behind. We are the proof that they failed. The room was silent. Then he added, softer, we don't fight to survive anymore. We fight to remind the stars that humanity still has teeth. The Cinder Fleet. They called it the Cinder Fleet, a name chosen by the soldiers themselves. The ships were rough, uneven, nothing like the smooth alien craft that had once burned their skis. Some were old colony vessels turned into war machines. Others were built from crashed wrecks and orbital debris, welded together with stubborn will and human rage. Their hulls bore painted names like Vengeance, Iron Dawn, Freedom's Cry, and Never Again. Each one carried a crew that had lost everything. And each one carried enough firepower to make the stars remember Earth's fury. The rebirth of Mars. On Mars, where red dust covered the remnants of ancient domes, Captain Amina led her fleet out of orbit. Her ships were smaller, faster, designed for hit-and-run strikes. When her final ship launched, she looked back at the planet below and whispered, "Home is not behind us anymore. It's ahead." Then she opened a channel to Harlan's fleet. "Cinder Fleet, this is the Martian Legion. We are ready." Harlan's reply came through the static, calm and steady. "Then let's light the way." The new humanity. Humanity had changed. The pain of the harvest had burned away everything weak, everything soft. What remained was something harder, something the Zyrex could never understand. There were no nations anymore. No borders. No flags. Only one symbol, the burning circle of the Cinder Fleet, a ring of fire around a single star. The mark of a people who had died once and refused to stay dead. They didn't speak of revenge like a dream. They spoke of it like a duty. And in the empty halls of their ships, the young whispered the same vow taught by their elders. "We remember, we rebuild, we return." The first light. The fleet launched on a cold morning over Earth. Engines flared like a sunrise, blue and gold and fierce. From the ground, the people watched as the sky lit up, the thunder of 1,000 rockets shaking the air. Children pointed. Old soldiers wept. The launch wasn't just a departure. It was the first roar of a species reborn. As the ships ascended, Jun watched from the bridge of Genesis. Harlan stood beside him, hands clasped behind his back, eyes unblinking. "After everything they did," Jun said, "do you ever think we'll forgive them?" Harlan didn't answer for a long time. Then he said quietly, "Forgiveness is for those who stopped fighting. We're not done yet." The enemy stirs. Far across the void, in the heart of the Zyrex Empire, their listening posts began to pick up the signal, energy readings, warp trails, human transmissions. At first they laughed. "Impossible," their commanders said. "A primitive race, they cannot reach us." But the laughter didn't last. Because the human ships didn't hide. They didn't sneak. They came loud, with signals blasting across every channel. To the Zyrex command, the broadcast said, "You burned our world. We are coming for yours." And for the first time in their long, cold history, the Zyrex felt something new. Fear. The fire reignited. As the fleet disappeared into the dark, the stars behind them shimmered like embers scattered across the night. Humanity was no longer just surviving, it was hunting. The universe had forgotten what it meant to make enemies of humans. They would learn again. Because the fire that once destroyed Earth had been reborn, not as destruction, but as purpose. and the Cinder Fleet carried that purpose to the ends of the galaxy. They were the storm after silence, the vengeance after mercy, the light that refused to die. The stars ahead glowed cold and white. In the center of that light, a planet hung in silence, perfect, shining, untouched. The Xyrex homeworld. After 2 years of travel, the Cinder Fleet had arrived. From orbit, the planet looked peaceful. Blue oceans, silver cities, towers that reached the clouds. It was everything Earth had once been, before the harvest. Commander Harlan stood at the bridge of the Iron Dawn, hands clasped behind his back. His face was older now, marked by time and battle. His eyes, though, burned like twin suns. Junwei stood beside him, his fingers trembling over the console. "That's their capital," he said. "Central control, military hub, civilian cities all around." Harlan said nothing. Jun hesitated. "If we hit them there, millions will die." Harlan turned his gaze toward the planet. "Then they'll understand what millions of our people felt." The voice from the void. Before the first shot was fired, the Xyrex spoke. A deep voice filled the comms, smooth and cold as ever. "Humans, you have no reason to come here. Your species was judged. You were found unfit. We gave you balance." Harlan pressed the transmitter. "You call it balance, we call it genocide." "You cannot win," the alien voice continued. "You are small, you are broken, you are." Harlan cut the transmission. "Let's prove them wrong." The first strike. The fleet moved in silence, engines flaring blue against the black. The first wave of missiles launched, small, almost humble-looking things compared to the sleek alien defenses. But they weren't just weapons, they were messages. Each one carried the name of a fallen city. Each one carried the memory of someone lost. Each one hit like the scream of a dying world. The first blast shattered an orbital station. The second tore through their defense grid. The third, hit the planet itself. It wasn't clean, it wasn't elegant, it was raw, brutal, human. And when the explosion reached the surface, the sky over Xyrex Prime turned to fire. The battle above the burning world. The Xyrex fleet scrambled. Silver ships erupted from the atmosphere, sleek and blinding, armed with energy cannons that could melt steel. But they were met by something fiercer. The Cinder Fleet moved like wolves, fast, hungry, unrelenting. Human pilots shouted across open channels, laughing through the chaos. "For Earth, for the fallen, for the ashes." Alien beams tore through human ships, splitting them apart. But for everyone that fell, 2 more pushed forward. They didn't retreat. They didn't yield. Because they weren't fighting for victory, they were fighting for memory. Jun's voice cracked through the comms. "Their main carrier is charging weapons." "Then let's give them something else to aim at," Harlan said. He turned to his crew, ramming speed. The Iron Dawn surged forward, engines roaring. The alien carrier fired, but Harlan's ship didn't stop. It tore straight into the enemy hull, ripping it apart in a burst of blue fire. The explosion was so bright it lit up the night side of the planet. The fall of the Xyrex. When the dust cleared, only a handful of Xyrex ships remained. Their command vessel sent one final broadcast, the voice trembling now, not with rage but fear. "Humans, why? We offered peace." Jun, blood running down his cheek, whispered the answer into the mic. "Peace was never yours to give." Then he pressed the final command. All across the Cinder Fleet, the last of the human weapons launched. Thousands of warheads streaked toward the surface, each carrying a memory, a name, a promise. The planet below lit up like a dying star. Oceans boiled, towers melted, skis turned to flame. The Xyrex homeworld was burning, just as Earth once had. The end of the war. When it was over, the planet was silent. The Xyrex were gone, nothing left but ash and ruin. No one cheered, No one laughed. The fleet hung in orbit, watching the fire spread across the surface. Harlan, bruised and bleeding, stared down from the bridge. "They called it balance," he said quietly. "Now they have it." Jun closed his eyes. "We became what they feared." "No," Harlan said. "We became what they created." The message in fire. Before leaving orbit, humanity left behind one final gift. Using orbital cannons, they burned 5 words into the surface of the dead world, so deep, so vast, that even from space they glowed against the ashes. "We remember, never again." Every surviving ship watched in silence as the words burned bright against the planet's dying light. Then one by one, the ships turned toward home. The war was over. The galaxy was quiet. And humanity, scarred, furious, unbroken, had reclaimed its place among the stars. The Zyrex thought humans were fragile. They thought mercy made them weak. But they learned too late what mercy becomes when you burn it away. It becomes vengeance. And in the end, the message humanity sent wasn't written in peace treaties or words. It was written in fire. And the universe would never forget it. The Cinder fleet drifted in the Black Sea of space, silent and waiting. Ahead of them hung the Zyrex homeworld, a perfect marble of silver and blue. It was beautiful. It was poison. Every human who saw it felt the same quiet rage. This was where it began. This was where billions of human lives were stolen and fed to alien greed. Now at last they had come to end it. The calm before the storm. Commander Harlan stood at the front of the flagship Iron Dawn. The bridge was dim, lit only by the pale glow of screens. Through the viewport, the Zyrex world gleamed like a cold jewel. Junwei stood beside him, holding a small metal pendant. Inside it was a photo, his wife and daughter, both lost in the harvest. "Do you think they're watching?" Jun whispered. Harlan didn't look at him. "If they are, we'd better give them a show worth seeing." Below deck, thousands of soldiers prepared for battle. Some prayed. Some laughed. Some sat in silence, holding onto bits of earth, soil, pictures, rings, reminders of what they were fighting for. No one pretended this would be easy. Most didn't expect to survive. But they had already died once. What was one more time? The first contact. A transmission cut through the void, cold, calm, perfect. "Humans," the voice said, smooth and emotionless. "We see you. Stand down, you cannot win. The Zyrex Empire does not fall." Harlan leaned over the console. "This is Commander Harlan of Earth. You already fell, you just don't know it yet." "You are misguided," the alien replied. "We brought balance to your kind, we spared." "Balance?" Harlan snapped. "You erased our world and called it mercy. You killed our children and called it peace." He turned to his crew. "Cut the channel. The storm breaks." Then the sky lit up. The Zyrex fleet rose from their planet like a swarm of silver knives, sleek and bright, moving in perfect formation. They fired first. Blue fire streaked across the void, cutting through the dark. Human ships exploded in silent bursts of light. But the Cinder fleet didn't flinch. They fired back missiles, plasma, railguns, weapons built from the ruins of Earth itself. Crude, dirty, brutal, human. The first wave smashed through the enemy's outer line. The second burned through their carriers. The third went straight for the planet. "Keep pushing," Harlan shouted. "Make them feel what we felt." The cost of fire. On the second day of the battle, space was nothing but wreckage. Human ships burned beside alien ones, a field of glowing ghosts drifting around the dying world. The Iron Dawn shook violently as it took another hit. Jun fell, sparks raining over him. "Hull breach on deck 7, he shouted. "Seal it," Harlan barked. "Redirect power to the forward guns." Jun looked up at him, eyes full of exhaustion. "We're losing ships." "So are they," Harlan said. and we can afford it more than they can." Then came the voice again, weak now, trembling with disbelief. "Humans, stop. You do not understand. You will destroy everything." Harlan smiled grimly. "Exactly." He pressed the final command. The fall of the Zyrex. All across the Cinder Fleet, the remaining ships turned their weapons toward the planet below. Thousands of warheads, kinetic slugs, plasma lances, every weapon humanity had ever built, unleashed at once. From orbit, the Zyrex world bloomed in fire. Cities vaporized, oceans boiled, the sky cracked open. A civilization that had ruled for centuries was reduced to ash in hours. And through it all, humanity watched in silence. No cheers, no victory songs. Only quiet satisfaction, and sorrow too deep for words. The last words. When the flames finally faded, Jun approached Harlan. "It's done," he said softly. Harlan looked out at the smoking planet. "No," he said, "it's finished." Jun hesitated. "Do you ever wonder if we went too far?" Harlan's voice was low, steady. "They took mercy from us, so we taught them what happens when mercy dies." The message in fire. Before the fleet left orbit, they sent one last broadcast. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement. Using orbital lasers, the humans burned 5 words into the planet's surface, so vast they could be seen from space. "We remember, never again." Then the Cinder Fleet turned away, leaving the dead world behind. As the engines flared and the ships disappeared into the black, Jun whispered a prayer, not for the living but for the lost. And in the silence that followed, the galaxy trembled. Because every race, every empire, every world that had once feared the Zyrex now saw what humanity had done. The monsters who had devoured Earth were gone. And in their place, a new legend was born. Of a species that could be broken, burned, and buried, but would always rise again. The war was over. The stars were quiet. And for the first time in centuries, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Where the Zyrex homeworld once glowed, there was only ash, a dead ember floating in the dark. No signals, no life, no empire. The destroyers had been destroyed, and the ghosts of Earth were finally at rest. The long journey home. The Cinder Fleet drifted away from the ruins in silence. Engines burned low, hulls cracked and scarred, thousands dead, millions changed. No one cheered, no one sang. War had given them what they wanted, justice. But it had taken everything else. Commander Harlan stood on the bridge of what was left of the Iron Dawn, its lights flickering, its walls streaked with smoke. Through the viewport, the stars stretched endlessly ahead. Junwei stood beside him, pale and exhausted, holding the pendant that carried his family's photo. He spoke quietly. "It's gone, all of it. Their worlds, their cities, their people, just gone." Harlan didn't answer right away. His voice, when it came, was steady. "They called it balance, we just returned it." Jun turned to him. "So what now? Do we keep fighting, keep burning everything that ever hurt us?" Harlan looked out at the stars, eyes empty. "No," he said, "now we learn how to live again." The weight of victory. Days passed in silence as the fleet traveled through the black. They carried the wounded, the broken, the haunted. People who had lost their families twice, once to the harvest and again to vengeance. On every ship, the mood was the same. They had won, but it didn't feel like victory. Because vengeance gives purpose, but it does not give peace. Harlan spent his nights alone, staring at old maps of Earth. Every scar on the planet's surface told a story, one of fire and loss, one of survival. And now one of revenge. He whispered to the empty room, "We did what we had to, but God help us, what have we become?" The new dawn. When the fleet reached Sol, the survivors saw something they hadn't seen in generations: Earth, alive. From orbit, the planet still bore its scars, but green had returned. Rivers flowed again. Cities were being rebuilt. Children were playing in the dust. The fires of war had given way to quiet renewal. Jun looked out the viewport, tears in his eyes. It's beautiful. Harlan nodded slowly. It's home. The fleet descended, breaking through the clouds like falling stars. When the first ship landed, the people waiting below dropped to their knees, not in fear but in awe. They had thought the fleet would never return. They had thought their warriors were lost forever. But the Cinder Fleet had come home, not as heroes, not as conquerors, but as survivors who had burned their nightmares to ash. The children of fire. In the years that followed, humanity rebuilt. They turned the wreckage of alien ships into monuments. They carved names into the walls of rebuilt cities, names of the lost, the fallen, the forgotten. Children grew up not hearing stories of despair, but of defiance. They learned about the harvest, about the fire, about the day humanity fell and the day it rose again. They learned about the message carved into the enemy's dead world. We remember, never again. That phrase became the creed of the new human age. It was carved into every ship, every city, every heart. A promise and a warning. The legacy. Years later, Junwei became a teacher. He no longer carried his rifle, only a story. He taught the young what the old had done and what it had cost. When a student once asked, "Did we win?" Jun paused, looking out the window toward the rebuilt skyline. He smiled sadly. "We survived," he said. "That's better." The whisper in the void. The universe had seen what humanity was capable of. The alien empires that once mocked Earth now watched their borders carefully. None dared attack. None dared forget. Because every time they looked into the night sky, they could still see the faint, scorched glow where the Xyrix world used to be. A silent reminder that the smallest species can burn the brightest when cornered. The silence after fire. On the anniversary of the war's end, Commander Harlan stood once more on Earth's surface, in the ruins of the old capital. He watched the sun rise through the dust, a bright orange fire climbing over the horizon. Jun stood beside him, gray-haired now. "It's quiet," Jun said. Harlan nodded, the kind of quiet that comes after a scream. They stood there a long time, saying nothing. Just watching the world turn. And as the wind whispered through the broken stones, it carried a sound, soft, faint, almost like words. "We remember." The fire had gone out, but its light still burned in every heart. Humanity had paid the price, and it had learned what power truly meant. Not the power to destroy, but the power to endure. The Xyrics were gone. The galaxy was changed forever. And in the silence that followed, the stars themselves seemed to bow. Because they finally understood the truth. You can break a world. You can burn a species. But you can never kill humanity. Centuries passed. The scars of war faded, but the memory never did. Humanity spread again, across worlds once thought unreachable, building new cities under alien suns. Everywhere they went, they carried one symbol, a ring of fire around a single star. The mark of the Cinder Fleet. They no longer fought for vengeance. They fought for balance, the kind born not of fear but of understanding. When they met new races, they didn't conquer, they warned. They taught them the cost of arrogance, of cruelty, of forgetting mercy. In the great halls of the Galactic Union, there stood a single monument. A scorched fragment of metal from the Xyrix homeworld, engraved with the words that began it all. "We remember, never again." And every time a child asked what it meant, the elders smiled and said, "It means we were tested, and we did not break." The stars grew bright again. The fire that once destroyed Earth had become its light. And through that eternal glow, the universe remembered. Not the war, not the ashes, but the unbreakable heart of humanity.